its arms in every direction hoping one would sting. Less than a week after the vote that dethroned her, 3 neighbors, Lisa, Jeff, and I, received certified letters from what claimed to be the HOA legacy office, which was clearly not a real thing. Inside each envelope was a thick packet alleging we had committed procedural fraud, emotional coercion, and intentional community disruption. Karen even accused Jeff of bribery because of the lemonade cooler, stating that free refreshments may have swayed voters through unlawful incentivization. We stared at the documents, laughed for a solid minute, and then collectively dropped them into the recycling bin with a kind of ceremonial calm, as if tossing out expired coupons. But even as we joked, we all knew Karen wasn't done. That kind of delusion doesn't just fade, it festers and reinvents itself. The next blow came 2 days later when a truck pulled up at the edge of the neighborhood and began unloading speed bump. Not the kind approved by the city, but huge, ugly, industrial ones that looked like someone had repurposed abandoned parking lot materials. A man in overalls said he had a work order to install speed deterrent humps per HOA Safety Directive 41-7C. When asked who submitted the request, he showed us a form signed, naturally, by Karen. She had faked a work order and tried to get massive rubber hazards placed across a public road. The guy was just a contractor doing his job and, to his credit, called his supervisor the moment things started sounding weird. Within the hour, the installation was cancelled, the bumps were reloaded, and the company promised to verify all future jobs with city records. But that wasn't the end of it. That night, someone knocked on my door and handed me an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo of my own driveway taken from a low angle, clearly snapped from the bushes or behind a car. On the back of the photo, written in sharp, erratic handwriting, were the words, "Violation, unregistered concrete pattern." My jaw dropped. Unregistered concrete? Karen had officially lost whatever thread of logic she had left. I wasn't scared, not really. I was furious. This was no longer petty. This was obsession. Lisa received a photo too, of her patio umbrella with a post-it note reading "Color conflict with roof tiles." Jeff's picture showed his grill with the caption, "Aggressive smoke signature." We met that evening at my place, reviewed everything, and agreed it was time to escalate things ourselves, but legally, cleanly, and publicly. The next day, Evan filed a formal harassment complaint with the neighborhood mediation office, and we submitted a cease and desist order citing Karen's repeated attempts at impersonating a governing body, unauthorized photography of private property, and filing fraudulent HOA actions after her removal. But the most devastating blow came not from paperwork, but from an unexpected source, Karen's ex-husband Ron. I'd never met him before, but apparently, he used to own the house Karen currently lived in, and by some stroke of divine poetic justice, he never fully transferred the deed into her name. According to county records, she'd been living there under an informal arrangement for over a decade, with the house still technically listed under an inactive LLC he managed. When Ron heard about the neighborhood chaos, because apparently someone mailed him a USB with video highlights, he showed up unannounced on a Thursday, tall, calm, carrying a leather folder, and introduced himself like a guest star entering in the final act. He explained everything in his deep, matter-of-fact voice. That Karen had threatened to sue him when he tried to sell the property years ago, that he'd walked away from it out of exhaustion, and that he now felt morally compelled to intervene. What followed was surreal. Ron submitted paperwork to reclaim the house under the original LLC. It was legal. It was clean. It was brutal. Karen had always acted like the queen of the neighborhood, but now she was, legally speaking, a squatter in a house that technically didn't belong to her. Ron didn't throw her out. Not yet, but he did send her a notice of intent to list the property for sale, citing her misuse of it as a base for community disruption. She stormed into my yard the moment she read the letter, screaming about how I had manipulated her marriage from the grave. I calmly handed her a printed copy of the HOA charter and said, "You're not even on the board anymore. She tried to swat the paper out of my hand, then paused, realized she was being watched by at least 4 neighbors from porches and windows, and stomped back home, her rage visibly rattling the air behind her. The next 48 hours were a quiet unraveling. Karen stopped posting on the HOA page. Her yard, which had always been perfectly trimmed, started to brown at the edges. The neighborhood was still wary, but a cautious optimism crept in. Lisa reinstated her porch flowers. Jeff hosted a spontaneous driveway barbecue. Margaret put up her twinkle lights and dared anyone to say a word. It was like the whole street was breathing again. But just as we started to relax, one last twist hit us like a rogue pool noodle in the wind. An envelope was hand-delivered to Evan's office downtown. Inside was a full complaint, filed under Karen's name, attempting to sue for emotional distress due to digital character assassination. The evidence included screenshots from the Facebook group, the pool video, and even a meme someone had made of Karen on the flamingo float with the caption, "Queen of Chlorine." Evan called me laughing, but even he admitted it was a clever move. Karen was trying to flip the narrative, make herself the victim, claim she'd been bullied and targeted. We needed to counter it fast and hard. So I uploaded a video, publicly, not just to the Facebook group, but to a community-wide portal run by the city. It was calm, fact-based, and structured like a documentary. It started with the fence jump. It ended with her yelling through the gate, demanding to be released from my pool. No commentary. No insults. Just the truth. It gained traction almost immediately, and the support flooded in. Neighbors from other HOAs commented that they'd seen people like Karen before, that her tactics were all too familiar. Someone even invited me to speak on a podcast called Neighborhood Nightmares. In the end, Karen's lawsuit didn't go anywhere. The court dismissed it without even scheduling a hearing. But the damage to her image was permanent. She became a punchline. Not in a cruel way, but in the way communities quietly deal with bullies, by laughing at the ridiculousness and refusing to give them back the power they once had. Karen kept to herself after that. The flamingo float disappeared from her yard. The fake surveillance van was towed away. The lemon-scented scent trail faded. And we, the neighborhood that had once tiptoed around her rules and threats, stood a little taller. We talked more. We trusted more. And we never forgot the lesson, that sometimes all it takes to stop a tyrant is a locked gate, a camera, and the will to laugh when they start yelling. The morning the press arrived at the cul-de-sac was the first time our sleepy little neighborhood felt like a movie set. A white SUV with tinted windows parked just beyond the mailboxes, and a woman in a navy blazer stepped out holding a mic with a local channel logo taped to the handle. She glanced around, politely declined Lisa's offer of iced tea, and introduced herself as a reporter covering unusual HOA conflicts, which was a nice way of saying she'd heard about the pool incident, the flamingo float, and the dethroning of a self-declared dictator in a lemon-colored cardigan. She'd seen the viral footage, the memes, and the city mediation filings. Now, she wanted to talk to me. Not just about Karen, but about what it meant when an entire neighborhood said, enough. I wasn't nervous. I was calm, prepared, maybe even smug, because the story no longer belonged to just one angry woman with a clipboard. It had become everyone's. I walked with her toward the backyard, past the newly repaired gate, past the small sign that now read Private Pool, HOA Board Access Revoked, and sat beside the water that started it all. She asked thoughtful questions. I answered honestly. She laughed at the right parts, furrowed her brow at the worst parts, and genuinely seemed to grasp that while it was easy to laugh at Karen's flamingo float drama, the real story was about power and what happens when people take it back with clarity instead of chaos. Halfway through the interview, Karen appeared at the edge of her yard, arms crossed, dressed in a sharp blazer that clashed with her aggressively orange leggings. She watched, fuming. I knew she'd try something, and I wasn't wrong. As the camera crew rolled footage of the neighborhood for B-roll, Karen stormed across the lawn and began yelling over the mic. She accused me of staging everything, of creating a hostile environment, of exploiting her image for personal gain. She waved a printed screenshot of a meme and demanded it be removed from public circulation. The cameraman kept filming. The reporter kept her composure, nodding gently while never once lowering her mic. It was the moment Karen had unknowingly waited her whole life for, the center of attention, a captive audience, and the full spotlight on her grievances. But it backfired spectacularly. Mid-rant, she slipped on a patch of wet grass, stumbled forward, and fell straight into the pool. Not dramatically, not with any grace, just a full, face-first drop that left her soaking wet, sputtering, and shrieking about liability while the inflatable flamingo, yes, it had returned for comedic flair, bobbled lazily past her shoulder. The silence that followed was thicker than concrete. Then, a single, muffled laugh came from Jeff's porch. Then Lisa. Then me. Even the reporter cracked a smile. Karen, soaked and red-faced, demanded towels and justice, both of which were in short supply. She climbed out, her blazer sagging like a deflated parachute, and fled back to her house with no further statement. That clip made it into the final news segment, edited cleanly but unmistakably. The anchor even paused before saying, "Well, that's one way to make a splash in local politics." The comments were merciless. The internet declared her Poolgate Karen. Someone auto-tuned her yells into a remix that hit 50,000 views in 2 days. A parody Twitter account popped up under the name @QueenOfChlorine. But while the internet laughed, Karen went silent. She boarded up her Facebook profile, stopped walking her imaginary dog, and kept her curtains drawn. Yet even in her retreat, the ripple effect of her reign remained. One afternoon, a strange truck rolled through the neighborhood. Not the fake surveillance van. This one belonged to a city code compliance officer. Apparently, Karen had filed an official complaint against our entire street for systematic HOA mutiny and requested a citywide audit of neighborhood zoning practices. But the officer, a tired-looking man with a sun visor and clipboard, lasted 10 minutes before shaking his head and telling Lisa, "I think I've been punked." He left with a lemonade and a firm warning that fake reports could carry legal consequences. It wasn't over. Karen had one last trick up her soggy sleeve. A week later, a new letter arrived, this time from a law firm in town. She had filed a personal small claims suit against me, citing intentional emotional distress and public humiliation resulting in reduced neighborhood prestige. Evan nearly fell out of his chair laughing when I showed him. But we didn't laugh it off. We prepared. We built the timeline. We stacked the documentation. We had videos, citations, statements from neighbors, and digital timestamps going back months. It wasn't a defense. It was a wall. And when the court date arrived, we walked in not with fear, but with certainty. Karen, to her credit, showed up in full courtroom attire. Heels, pearls, and a printed binder with the words, HOA Injustice, a personal reckoning scrawled across the front. She represented herself, which became apparent within 5 minutes when she began by addressing the judge as Your Majesty and tried to submit memes as evidence of defamation. The judge, bless him, gave her more patience than anyone expected. He listened. He asked questions. He reviewed everything. Then he dismissed the entire case with a single sentence. Ms. Havers, being embarrassed by your own actions is not grounds for legal compensation. And with that, it was over. For good this time. Karen left without another word. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She didn't even slam the courtroom door. She just vanished. The neighborhood, which had lived under her bureaucratic thumb for years, finally exhaled. Jeff threw a block party. Lisa designed a new welcome packet for incoming residents. Margaret suggested a mural. And me? I took a long swim in the pool, letting the sunlight reflect off the water with nothing but quiet peace around me. There was no flamingo float, no shouts, no threats, just the soft hum of sprinklers, the buzz of cicadas, and the gentle realization that justice didn't always roar, it sometimes just locked the gate, leaned back, and waited. and when Karen's for sale sign finally went up, subtle,